Judy, I first wanted to start out by saying thank you so much for participating in the free webinar. We're really grateful to have you.
It's my pleasure. I
Yeah,
look forward to it.
yeah. And, you know, when I was thinking about your introduction, I remember when I, you know, heard you speak at a London conference, and I was really impacted by the work that you were doing. At that point, you were talking about the work that you're doing with former sex workers and veterans, and it just really touched me. And so I really knew that I wanted to include you in the Soul-Centered series, but I didn't know all of your background at that point. And so when we had our first evening and you were sharing like the full range of everything that you've done, from teaching to being an investigative journalist to owning a medical practice management company to becoming a corporate consultant to, you know, it was like, whoa. And it was just really exciting to hear your journey and how this understanding has impacted you and shifted things along the way. So I know we're going to hear some of that today. Yeah. And not only do you have that rich range of experience and, you know, amazing intellect and wit to go along with it, what I was also really touched by was the depth of the feeling that we experienced in your weekend when you're out here in Santa Monica. There was just such a beautiful, reflective, peaceful quality that was very present. So I know that's also going to be part of this experience here with you today. So looking forward to that.
Thank you.
So Judy and I were able to have a little chat beforehand, and one of the things that I had known that Judy's working on is her new book that she said that she's 2/3 of the way through. And you know, it's about your journey and the understanding, what you're seeing now. And I thought that that would be a great starting point to kick us off for this webinar. We're going to share probably for about, you know, the first half of it, we'll have you sharing, and then the last half of it, we'll take questions from people or reflections from people. Okay. So if you're open to speaking to that, you know, maybe you could start with just the inspiration. Why now? How coming at this point in time?
Well, it's sort of funny because for years, first of all, hello everybody, and thank you so much for being on the call. I've been involved in this work for almost, I guess, about 35 years now, and so it represents more or less half of my working life. And since I started working when I was a teenager, but which is true, but I never wanted to write a book. And everybody started writing books, and people would say to me, why aren't you writing a book? You're actually a writer. You know, you were a journalist and you ran a magazine and blah, blah, blah. I'm going like, I don't know. Everybody else is writing books, and I just didn't feel moved to do that. I did start writing a blog because I just felt like my primary source for the work that I do is Sid Banks, who's written 6 books. And that's kind of like enough for me. And I just didn't feel like I had anything I really wanted to say that was better than anything that he'd already said or that other people hadn't, you know, interpreted or written about. And I just didn't feel like contributing another killing of trees into the environment. So I didn't do it. And then in June, when I was at the London conference, I realized that all of us who were the, I don't know, I guess the pioneers or the original people that started bringing this work into the world are getting old. And some of us are no longer here, and some of us are not well. And it struck me that that we have kind of a different perspective. And one of the things that struck me was people at this conference were treating us with a great deal of deference, which was very off-putting to me. And I know it was nice and it was sweet and they meant well, but you know, I just felt like, you know, wait, you know, for years, all we've talked about is that we're all the same. Everybody's connected to the same wisdom. We might have different experiences of it or different levels of or degrees of having, you know, made use of it, but we're all the same. And I didn't feel comfortable because really the only thing special about me is that I'm old and I've been doing it for a long time. You know, so I've had a lot of experiences, but everybody's going to get there. Trust me, hang in there. You'll You'll come to the point where you can look back and go, gosh, I've done a lot of stuff and I've had a lot of interesting experiences. So on the plane on the way home from England, I was reflecting on this one conference that I went to with a client of mine who was a neurosurgeon years ago when I was running a practice management business. And my client invited me to this because we shared a love of, philosophy and kind of poetry and all these interesting sort of things that had nothing to do with our actual careers. And he said, this guy who's speaking is one of the most famous neurosurgeons in the world, and he's changed the whole face of neurosurgery. So how famous he was, I can't remember his name, but anyway, I'm sure the neurosurgeons do. And I think you'd love his talk. I don't even know what he's going to talk about, but it's his last talk because he's dying of cancer. He knows he's dying. And he said he'd talk one more time at our national conference. And everybody's very excited about it because he's done so many wonderful things, and we just can't wait to see what he shares. So I went on the strength of that, and the guy got up to speak, and he had put a slide up, and it was a list of 10 names. And he said, which nobody had ever heard of, and he said, these are the people that I want to talk about today. These are the 10 people who died on my operating table. And you could feel this hush come over the room. And then he started speaking about each case, and he had pictures of the people. He put pictures of them, like with their children, or a picture of them with their husband or their whatever. So he put up a picture of the person before, and then he did, slides from the surgery explaining what had gone wrong in the surgery. And then he had pictures of their funerals because he went to every one of them. And I'm sitting in a room full of neurosurgeons crying, which if you know anything about medicine, that's not a common event. And they were just so moved and touched by the fact that of all the things he could have talked about his last time, what he wanted to share with them is that it's okay to make mistakes. You have to acknowledge your mistakes. You have to learn from them. And if you share them, it'll help people. And then I started reflecting on my own journey through the many years that I spent involved with the principles. And I realized it wasn't that easy. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of really stupid stuff. I got stuck a lot of times. It wasn't like some, sudden trip to nirvana. Although at each step along the way, I would have said, I'm so much better off than I was before, and I could have just quit. I could have quit the third day, because it turned me around just to think that life worked from the inside out, not from the outside in. I mean, that was a revelation to me. And it did change a lot of things for me, but that was so minuscule. And I thought of Sid saying that, what's available to us is infinite, and there's no end. There's so many doors to open. There's no end to the learning. And I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to write about. I'm going to write about the journey of learning and how you think you're done, but you're not. And that given a chance, you'll get a lesson and you'll realize, uh-oh, I don't know what to do about this. And that, life is filled with opportunities to learn from your own misunderstandings and mistakes. So that's what I'm doing.
That's beautiful. Can't wait to read it, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will really get a kick out.
And I'm curious to start out in terms of the before and after, because it sounds like that's going to be part of the book. Can you share a little bit of that now? Like what was different before the understanding, and what were some of the big differences afterwards? Yeah,
well, if you were to put it all in one bucket, I would say that I realized, I don't usually think about my past, it's just pointless. But in order to write a book about it, you kind of have to. And one of the things that I realized when I really started reflecting on it, that ever since babyhood, really, I've had, like all people have had, inspired thoughts out of the blue that would really have helped me had I listened. And sometimes I did listen. In the times that I did, I would write it off to luck or desperation or something like that. I never stopped and asked myself, gosh, where did that come from? And I'll give you a quick example. So when I first got out of college, I was working for a publication in Hartford, Connecticut, and I got assigned to go interview parents of African American students who were being bused. It was the first year of busing to achieve integration of the schools. And everybody, well, let me put it this way, all the politicians thought this was a big move forward in civil rights, and it was going to be such a wonderful thing and all of that. And so my editor assigned me to go talk to the parents of Black students who were being bused. And at that time, I didn't know any Black people in Hartford where I was living. And I didn't know how to find parents. I didn't know how to start. But I, of course, accepted the assignment because I'm a good girl and it was my assignment. And I'm new and young and I got to do it. So, and I was at home I was getting a master's degree at the time. So I was at home the night before I was going to go out and try to find people to interview, just kind of doing my homework. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, because I'd done a drive through the neighborhood where they had all lived, that there was a gas station in the middle of that neighborhood. And I thought, I had this idea. So I thought, that's crazy. But then I thought, well, I don't have any other ideas. And I just went back to my homework. And the next morning I got up and I didn't have any other ideas. So I drove into the gas station and fortunately did need gas, and I got gas. And that was in the days when somebody came out and pumped your gas. And this young Black man came out and pumped my gas. And when he finished, I said, may I use the restroom? And he said, oh, you don't want to do that, because this is segregation. Remember, we used to have signs that said colored and white. And no white person ever used a colored bathroom and vice versa. He said, you don't want to do that, lady. He said, this is a colored gas station. And I said, well, I don't mind. And he said, well, go in and talk inside. The manager's inside. So I parked my car in the gas station and I went inside. And the manager was there, and I said, may I use your restroom? And he said, I don't think you want to. And I said, no, I really don't. I'd love to. I'd really appreciate it if I could use the restroom. So he hands me the key and he says, it's fine with me. And he made some remark like, I'm sure if this was a white gas station, it wouldn't be fine with them, but it's fine with me if you want to do it. And he handed me the key and I went into the restroom, which was spotless, I might add. Unlike most gas station restrooms I've been in. And then when I came out, I gave him back his key and I bought a soda, because he was sitting there talking to two other guys. And so I thought, if I buy a soda, maybe I could chat with them for a minute. I'll drink my soda. And I told him who I was, and they're looking at me like, why is she talking to us? And I said, I really need help, and I think maybe you could help me. And they said, well, what do you need? And I told them why I was there. And this one guy says to me, do you really want to know what these people think, or are you just here to reaffirm your own beliefs? And I said, oh no. I said, I work for a really nice publication, and they want me to find out what people really think, and I promise you I'll write exactly what they think, and we'll publish it. So he made 3 phone calls, and these 3 women showed up. And they took me to somebody's apartment, and we spent the afternoon together, and they gave me an earful. They were not happy about busing at all. And I remember one line that one woman said. She said, I don't know why you white people think it's a good idea for us to send our school with all your rich kids, and our kids are wearing secondhand clothes, and they have to take the bus for an hour and a half, and they can't stay after for school activities because they got to get the bus home, and you think that's going to help them. And all they're doing is realizing how pathetic their lives were. And then she started talking about how nice it was when they went to their neighborhood school and the parents knew the principal, and, and so on and so forth. So I wrote the story, and they did print it. And I took it back to the gas station, and the gas station people put it up on their wall, with the flyers and posters and advertisements. And everybody was so excited about it, because it was the first time that their point of view had ever been represented locally. And So that was how that worked out. Now, that idea was crazy. And it just popped into my head. And my editor said to me, "How did you get this story? How did you get these people to trust you?" And I said, "I asked to use the bathroom in the black gas station." And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, Judy, you're nuts, but you're going to make it in this business." And when I told him that idea, he said, "I don't know, in a million years that would have never occurred to me." And I said, "Well, I don't even know why it even occurred to me, but I was just lucky." And I didn't realize it was because I was sitting home quietly reading a book, that I enjoyed for a class that I was liking, and my mind was free and clear, and that idea popped into my head, and I had enough common sense to accept it, or enough desperation to accept it, either one, but I had to finish reading, so I couldn't really think about it much. I just sort of took it on and moved on. And that happened to me over and over, and a lot of the book is about moments like that in my life when I had a thought that would have helped me a lot, and most of the time I didn't pay attention to it, or I found 6 reasons why it was a bad idea, or I'd start overthinking it, and then it would get complicated and I couldn't do it. And the first thing that I realized when I saw a little glimpse of the principles is that those are actually the right ideas. And then I started thinking too hard about how to get them. I spent a lot of time trying really hard to be inspired. And so it's things like that.
Yeah, I think that's really common, that both not realizing an inspired idea arrives when it arrives, but also once we do have a better understanding of what it is, and thinking, well, we need to have it all the time, we need to have more. Yeah. How do I get more? Well, this understanding must be a way to show me how to have more of that. So can you speak to a little, because it sounds like you've been there too. So if you can speak to that, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I had spent most of my youth thinking, which is something I made up just in self-defense, because we moved when I was in 5th grade, and I was kind of bullied when, it's a long story, I won't go into it, but anyway, so in self-defense, I decided that my best safety was to be smarter than everybody else. And I thought being smarter than everybody else meant studying harder and learning more. So I spent most of my years between 5th and 12th grade in the library. And when I was in high school, I used to get my books together, and I lived in Washington, D.C. I used to go down to the Library of Congress to do my homework, because I thought it would imbue me with some, higher level of smartness to study in the Library of Congress. And I learned a lot of stuff, and I learned to think really hard. And I became a very successful nerd. And I was really, it served its purpose. I got into a good college and all of that, but I didn't have a lot of happiness, and I had this conversation with my dad one time, where my dad said, when you were little, Judy, you used to have so many dreams and ideas and fantastic stories, and you wrote poetry, and you did, you made up things with your dolls, and you don't use your imagination anymore. And I remember saying, well, why would I use my imagination? I'm older now, I'm in school, I'm supposed to be studying, and that's all childish stuff. And I remember him just shrugging and saying, well, it didn't seem that way to me, but if it does to you, so be it. And I lost that childish, childhood kind of capacity to live in the illusion of life and just play there. And I was living in the certainty of all these other people's thoughts, and at some point when I was in college and I was expected to think for myself, I was terrified, because I was really good at learning what other people thought and analyzing it and talking about it with a certain level of certainty and expertise. I was a star debater, that kind of thing. But when somebody handed me a blue book and said, what do you think of this? Write for an hour. I was like, holy shit. Yeah, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? And it was a real eye-opener for me to discover that you were supposed to have ideas of your own. And I didn't know how to do that. I knew how to work in the world of ideas, but they weren't my ideas. They were just ideas about other people's ideas. And so it was a big experience for me to be forced to do that. But even doing that, I was always looking for validation. So if I had an idea, then I would go to the library and see if anybody else had a similar idea and what they did with it and that kind of thing. So I never had these just like happy moments of going, oh yeah. I just didn't experience that at all, to be honest with you. Or if I did, I don't remember it. And as I got older, what happened is, and I was really successful in a lot of things I did, but it was more and more intellectual and less inspirational, to the point that I was really depressed when I didn't know that, because I was just like all my friends. So we were all depressed and didn't know it, and not clinically, not like I needed to be hospitalized or anything, but I really wasn't having fun, even though I had a really nice life by external standards. So what I had to learn is, happiness, as Sid says in Second Chance, when Jonathan asked him, what is happiness? What is success? He says, happiness. And Jonathan says, just that? Is that it? And Sid says, isn't that enough? And I read that book. It was the first book that Sid had come out with, and it had just come out when I first got involved with learning from Bill Pettit. And so I read that book, and when I came to that passage, I was terrified, because I realized I have no idea what happiness is, the way he was talking about it. And yet I'm successful, by all the standards of the world. Mm-hmm. And it was a big moment for me, and a very simple moment, but very, it started to turn my life around. But I still thought too much for years. I mean, I could go on and on, but so that's really the kind of, I think about the fact that for all people, it is natural to us. It is, like Sid says, it's, in simplicity lies complexity, and all the answers to your complex problems come in moments of insight, that some of them are kind of funny, some of them are simple, you can't believe them. Some of them seem obvious until you realize you never thought of it before, and but that's kind of revealing when you realize that it's there, it's always there, it's just whether we notice it, whether that's where our attention goes, whether those are the ideas that register or not.
Yeah, it's like, what do we value and look in the direction of? Is it magnifying and embellishing our intellect and our ego, or is it really dropping into that deeper place inside of ourselves? And like you said, that's an ongoing journey. It's not like a one-time event where it happens and you're there. So how did that impact your life when you saw that more clearly for yourself, that the direction that you were going, that you thought was successful, was actually not taking you in the direction of happiness and contentment?
Well, it impacted my life in a lot of ways. I ended up divorced, which was kind of, which is not the usual outcome, I will say, although it was very amicable, which wouldn't have been the outcome had I not understood what I knew. But that wasn't really, that's kind of a long story, but my whole life was built on the image of being a good, social and successful and upbeat and participatory and a good hostess, and but none of it was real. It was all what I knew I was supposed to do. So I'd have to say it was ego. It was insecurity coming out as ego, which is the insecurity and ego are the same thing. And when I when I started to calm down and really, live from inspiration, one of the things that happened is I really fell in love with my business, which I'd started to hate because because I was blaming my clients for my unhappiness. And of course, it wasn't their fault at all. It had nothing to do with them. And so I got better kind of at work. But what I realized is that my life was this sort of charade of, so I kept trying to drag my husband off to, to Sid Banks talks and get him to read Second Chance and ask him to come to this or that. And he thought it was crazy and he wasn't interested in it. And he began getting kind of upset with me because he thought I had joined a cult. And so it was kind of like I had a choice, both of us had a choice, and he didn't want to go my way and I didn't want to go back. And so it was the natural thing to do. We're still friends, and he is remarried, and he's married somebody that is living life the way he really wants to live it. So it works out great for him, and he's fine. And I'm fine too. So it wasn't unpleasant. But that was kind of an ironic thing because I moved out to La Conner, right, to work with George and Linda right after I was divorced. And I was so ashamed of the fact that, I'm working for the people that are the marriage and family therapists. And we used to do these weekends for couples, and I just gotten divorced. And I was like, George, I don't even know why I moved here. I can't do this. And George, finally George says, well, I'm divorced and I never talk about it. So why don't you just stop talking about it? I didn't even know that. I didn't realize that Linda was his second wife. So that was funny. So, life is like, it's not about those outside things. It's about the feeling state you live in. And, it's this, to the degree that you start learning that and realizing that, you have ups and downs, and you're going to have, just like you don't stop being human just because you learn something about the principles, or because the principles start kind of creeping into your very soul, that the truth of it is starting to really blossom within you. Doesn't make you like this perfect person living in nirvana. It makes you a person that doesn't mind it when you're upset. Mm-hmm. and gets over things and has faith and confidence that you will, and doesn't take your negative thinking too seriously, and sees humor in your own stupidity, and is able to, just keep going through life and looking for the beauty in life, and accepting the fact that you can't always see it.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It doesn't, it's people, that's what was bothering me in London, is that people were treating me as though I must live in some special principles world, that other people can only aspire to. And I'm thinking like, oh, you just don't know me. No. I live in the same world everybody else lives in, only I just don't care. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, that's right. The principles doesn't take away the human experience. We still get to have that and have it. So I noticed that we have one hand raised. So I just want to remind people that we've got a couple already. So just a reminder, if you would like to raise your hand, just press the participants button and then the raise hand button, and then I'll see it. And, here we come. So I'm going to start off with, it's going to be either Andrea or Lee. So let me unmute you to find out who it is.
Hello, it's Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Andrew is on the call, but she's buried somewhere. She's on her own phone. So, hi there.
Hi.
Hi. I'm not going to use 3P language here because because in 3P language I understand the idea of just staying in the conversation.
Yeah.
And in my mind, in the back of my mind, I was like yourself, Judith, in the fact of I just wanted to study continuously.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying I'm not going to use 3P language. I heard this concept of like a Buddhist, I can't remember who said it, possibly Michael Neal, who said about they were doing 10,000 psalms to the north and to the west, and the Buddhist monk said, well, happiness is by accident. And they said, well, why do you do all these things? And they said, to be more accident prone, right? Um, I, and so again, my question, asked this before, how do I get more accident prone?
That's a great question. Don't try too hard is my answer. My answer is that we're born accident prone, and life continually delivers to us. You know, the wisdom of life flows through us, and it's right there, and we kind of override it. So accident proneness is going back to the simplicity of life as a child, just leaving your mind open to see what happens and not overthinking everything or trying too hard. So to me, I mean, when I think about my childhood, it really was quite magical, as was almost everybody's. and it's because children don't make any distinction between reality and their imagination. And if you think about it, that's kind of the truth, right? Because we're all imagining our life. Right. And, you know, we're living in separate realities, and that's our imagination at work. What I make of it is not necessarily what other people are making of it, even though we're having the same experience. So children kind of get that. Like, they don't argue with each other's fantasies and things. You know, they don't. If you see two little kids playing and one says, well, you know, there's a good fairy, and the good fairy lives in the tree outside my window, other kids just accept that. It's like, okay, I don't see the good fairy, but that's cool, you know. But, you know, older kids will go, there's no good fairy, that's ridiculous, you know. And so what you want to do is just be natural in that way, allow your mind to be open and see what occurs to you. And that is being accident prone, because what you're really listening to is the first and quietest voice.
Right. I loved what you said right at the end there. That was going to be my next question. You've just answered it, which is, how do you know what's instinct? And I guess that's really it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's when it's like the whisper that comes and you know it's right.
Right.
Or you know it's delightful, or you know it brings a smile to your face, or you know that it's helpful. It's like we can tell. It's like if somebody gives you bad advice, you know it's bad advice. You know, it's like I had a client, just to give you this very briefly, I had a client who had just really messed up her life in college. She started doing a lot of drugs, and she got involved with a boyfriend who was kind of trouble, and a lot of bad things happened. She graduated, so she got her degree, but her life was completely a mess. And she comes in to see me because she's had a child, and she doesn't want her child to be growing up this way. And she doesn't know how to get out of it. She doesn't know what to do. And I said to her, well, would you say that your decision to get together with this guy that you kind of knew was trouble was your decision? Did you make that decision? And she said, well, I guess so, because I ended up with him, and I had to choose to do that. And I said, and how about the drugs? Would you say that every time you used it was a choice? You had to go get the drug and take the drug and decide how much of it you wanted? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, there's a power behind us that allows us the freedom to choose. And when you realize that you've chosen something that's not working out for you, you can choose again. You know, because she was saying, I'm a failure, my life is over, my life is ruined. How am I going to? She wanted to undo the past. And I said, you can't undo the past, but every minute is a new choice. And how you can tell now when your choice is going to help you is when it doesn't feel like the old ones did. You know, it's like you got a nice baseline of what feelings you don't want to replicate, you know. So when you make a choice now, if it doesn't uplift you and make you feel like, oh yeah, this is going to take me where I want to go, you can step back from it, because now you know that you're the chooser, and some choices don't work out. And that's really how it is. It's that simple. You know, you start to realize, I've got the power. I'm the one with the power. I made all those choices. And I may have wanted to blame my whatever, but I made those choices, and I can choose anything. And, you know, I only saw her one. I mean, I'm going to see her again tomorrow, but Wednesday, but I only saw her once so far. But when she left my office, she said, I've been in therapy for 11 years and no one ever told me that I could make a choice.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Rohini.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks so much. All right, we'll go to the next person, Laurel. Hi, Laurel.
Hello, Rohini.
Hi, Laurel. How are you?
I'm really good, Judy. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to see you, and you are really the answer to an inquiry I've had. I grew up not knowing I was intelligent, and everything I said was criticized and refuted. So I had to go to my imagination and just make stuff up.
Yeah.
And I was, the cerebral cortex was so eclipsed by the emotional brain that, so I just made up my own stuff. And I now have a whole understanding of the English language that no one else has.
Right.
There are times when I am in my heart and in the quiet mind and the open heart. And I have not had the kinds of successes that you've had in the world and I feel like sometimes the tide is in and my heart is full to overflowing, and everyone I interact with, it just feels like a mutual blessing. And then the tide recedes and I feel bereft and despondent. And that's what happened over the weekend. And so then I was enumerating, as I have in the past, a litany of deprivation about all the things I haven't had in my life. And how can I be happy in this life? And then the tide comes in again and none of it matters. And so it's really helpful for me to hear you, since I was not the great student, I was not the great studier. And I have not had any of those things that you remind me are not the source of fulfillment.
You didn't miss a thing, really.
Well, this is what I'm getting, and the fullness that I have within myself and my creativity feels really great. And there was one time sitting in meditation, that kind of high-pitched tone we sometimes hear. Well, I heard it. It was prolonged. And I realized at the end that there was a greater download of information in that experience than in all the published books of everybody else's ideas. And so that's when I look at the word imagine and I see, oh, I'm a genie. If you, and it's also, if you turn it around, you just about have enigma. The last couple, and that's what it takes to, it takes imagination to solve an enigma. And just to conclude, in terms of success, what is success? I edit other people's books, and I ghost wrote a book for a man, and in it I created an acronym for success that he's never used, but I shall, and it is serving universally by contributing creatively to the evolution of the sacred in society. So
that's beautiful.
Isn't that fun? And so I think that makes us all successes as we endeavor to become more our true selves in the world and less an expression of the egoic mind, which can be pretty unpleasant, at least mine is. So thank you.
Well, the thing is, Laurel, that to me, it's okay to be unhappy sometimes. It's just unhappy thoughts that pop into our head. I know that it's
true, but I know it's true, and I find it so painful. And the default setting growing up was total despondency and complete distaste for being on this dimension of existence. And so it goes to a pretty low place. There is jealousy and envy and meanness in the thinking. And I remind myself of the Rumi poem, what is it called? The Guests or something like that, that may come in and sweep your home of all the furniture, a crowd of sorrows, and, and it could be a meanness. So it gives me some peace, because when that voice is loud, and I just feel, oh my God, I feel dragged along by, you know, a wild horse of negativity. And
yeah, well, you will feel whatever you're thinking, but you know, when you know that it's part of you have a very rich imagination. So in your higher states, and you write these beautiful poems and then play with the language, is very interesting what you do, I think. And very, very different, very creative, but meaningfully creative, and helps people. It's touching. So, but the problem is when you have that much creative energy, when you create something bad, it's also powerful, you know, because your imagination is vivid and you experience it fully. And you don't, you know, you just go with it. So, you know, when it's producing beautiful things, you know, you have this extraordinary high elevation of your soul and your spirit. And when you're producing the unpleasant feelings in life, or the negative things or bad memories, you experience those just as fully and completely. But that's actually still an illusion. The whole thing is an illusion. You know? So to know that is to give you a little bit of distance from it psychically. Gives you the feeling that this is just my incredible imagination working the dark side today, you know.
Well,
that's all it is.
thank you. Well, that's a very healthy perspective. And I just to conclude, I saw a movie with Cate Blanchett yesterday that has Bernadette something.
Oh yeah, Bernadette or something. Yeah, I saw it.
There's a line in it where the Lawrence Fishburne character says to her, "You were born to create, and when you're not creating, you're a menace to society." And I totally related. It's like, jeepers, it's ugly and dark inside when I'm not doing my own work.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Laurel. Thanks so much for sharing. All right, the next person is Trevor. Hi, Trevor.
Oh, hi. Hi, Judy. Can you hear me okay? Hey, you know, there's a couple of things, like when you were talking about that girl who said that she messed up her life. You know, that's what I'm going through at the moment. I've just come through a physical, really traumatic experience, like over a long period of time, with medication and everything, which has sort of really messed up my head. And I'm just sort of looking at, like, you know, what happened to the Three Principles honeymoon, you know, like, it seems to be over. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if that's like a thing that people experience. But I'm sort of a member of some stuff, some groups, some community, you might call it staying in the conversation. It's just winding me up. Like, it's just super winding me up. I feel like, like, just under this, like, if I hear like the default setting for human beings is happiness, and it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like I always revert back to shitty dark side, you know, like, it's just like, like I think of the Star Wars movies about how, you know, and superhero movies, how, you know, they really try and be really good, and then they end up just falling into the dark. And I just feel like, okay, how do I, you know, I'm just lost. I'm like, I hear this thing about, okay, I made choices, I took those medications, you know, there's a huge run up of events up to the things that happen in my life. But just thinking, haven't I got even a slight advantage by coming across this understanding that I could just get myself out of this mess? Like, because it just feels like,
yeah.
What am I doing? What am I doing? Like, what?
Yeah.
What am I missing? And I am creative, so I get this thing about when I create a scenario in my mind, it's vivid. I write and I'm a photographer and I do all sorts of creative stuff, but I can't stay in that creative energy long enough to actually create something that is sustaining me in my life.
Huh.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And let me see how I can put this. One of the things that keeps people stuck in the darkness of their thoughts is being frightened by their own thinking and taking it more seriously than they take ordinary thinking. So like you can go to the grocery store and try to decide between the bananas and the grapes. It doesn't seem like a big deal. And you make a choice and then you put them in your basket and move on. But in life, you could, be sitting there looking at a choice between X and Y, and you make a big thing of it, and then you think Y went bad, and why did that happen to me? And oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? And it becomes a gigantic problem. But what is really happening is that you made a choice, or you've gone in a direction that's taking you down. And instead of looking at it as temporary and just no big deal, it's just, it was an accident of thought. I followed those thoughts and I can just leave them alone, or see them as a sign that I need to just take it easy and clear my head and give myself a break and be kind to myself. You get wound up, as you put it, and start, going over and over in your mind. It's like, here it is again. It keeps happening to me. Why can't the principals help me? All this stuff. And that's just extraneous thinking about your negative thoughts in an act of sort of trying to figure them out. And we can never figure our way out of them. But if you pay no attention to them, they pass. The paying no attention part is what people miss. The ability to embrace a negative moment as a natural sign. When you start feeling bad, that's your body's way of telling you, hey, leave your head alone for a little while. It's not helping you. But that's what we don't do. We get frightened and then we think and think and think. I work with a lot of veterans who have PTSD. And one of the things that I will not talk to them about is the things that they have PTSD over. They already know that that's going to bum them out. That's what they all do. They get together and they sit in a bar and they talk about war and all the terrible things, and they wonder why they feel so shitty all the time, So we talk about dogs and trees and, movies we saw and jokes and stuff like that. And then, after a while, they'll say to me, well, is this really a group? And I'm saying, well, do you feel better or worse than when you came in? And they all go, we feel better. And I'm going like, yeah, I guess it's working out then. It's a group. But they've lost that ability to just be lighthearted in this present moment, because it's where you are, and let the past just drift into the past where it, put it away where it belongs. And so it's like one of the things that happened, I had to give up caffeinated coffee last year for a health reason. And I missed a week of group, 2 weeks of group actually, because I was ill. And then when I came back to group, I was telling the group, and a lot of these people have substance abuse problems. And I said, oh gosh, I really, you guys are going to feel for me when I tell you what my problem is today, because I had to give up my coffee, my caffeinated coffee. I love coffee. And I have to drink decaf. And one of the guys says, decaf, the O'Doul's of coffee. Because they all have to. O'Doul's is alcohol-free beer. And that's the only thing they can drink if they go to a bar. And it just cracked me up. And the whole group starts laughing. And he said, now I was so mad when I had to switch to O'Doul's, and I realized it's no different than what you're going through with your coffee, and we're all the same. It's no big deal. The idea is to be with your friends. And it just struck him, in that moment, that inspiration struck him, that he didn't have to feel bad about drinking O'Doul's. And I think that's part of what you're describing to me, is that you get wound up in your negative thoughts and try to fight them, rather than seeing that they're passing thoughts, and they will pass. And when they do pass, you'll feel better. And the idea is to distract yourself.
I feel like I get a glimpse of that, but almost, like a lot of the time I'm in reaction already. I'm already reacting. I do have a history of drug abuse, and there's a bit of there's a physical reaction to what's going on as well. Mm-hmm. I'm always sort of fighting. Oh, well, don't take anything to feel better. You've just got to let this settle. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so, you know, there's no, like, people out there drinking alcohol and smoking fags and doing vaping and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, you can't do any of that stuff. You just got to sort of learn to manage it on your own. And so
No, you got to find the things that you can do that you love.
Yeah, but I haven't got enough commitment to do that. I think, like, if I could just wave a magic wand, it would be like I could commit my mind to just focusing on one thing, like, and just get on with it. Instead of like a raft of that are all draining a little
something, just let it settle. Okay, I'm going to say something and see, just leave it alone and see what happens after a while. Okay, just take it in. Don't think too much. You are in charge of your mind. Your mind is not in charge of you.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Well, I am. And there's nothing wrong with you. Don't argue. Don't think too much. Just
Right.
okay? You're the thinker. You're in charge of what you decide to put your attention on. And nothing can force you into misery except the things that you think that you pay attention to because they frighten you or upset you or you wish you weren't thinking them or you're trying to fight them. So arguing with your own thoughts is kind of like shadow boxing. You can't win, you know, because there's nothing there. It's a shadow. Your feeling state is just the shadow of the quality of thoughts that you're having in the moment. And if you don't like it, turning away from those thoughts gives you some momentary opportunity to let your head clear. It only takes a moment. And when your head clears and you calm down and you stop fighting, your thoughts will start changing. But the problem is, the more you feel like you've got to be in charge of, directing these negative thoughts that have taken over your mind, it's like you go to war with something that is not really real. But if you're at war with it, it keeps it real to you. But it's just, it's your imagination at work. It's your thoughts are bringing forward things from the past or things from even right now that are troubling to you rather than other things, which happens. You know, when you've had a lot of trouble in your past, it's going to come to mind. That you can't stop that. But what you do with it is up to you. And right now, what you're describing is feeling bad about it, fighting it, using it to judge yourself, feeling bad about yourself because it gets you upset. And all of those are just thinking about your thinking in ways that keep it around and make it harder for you. So you really are in charge of what you do with the thoughts that come to mind. You can't prevent them from coming into mind, but you can prevent yourself from holding them there. And just give it a moment.
Yeah, Trevor, let that sink in, and if you want to reach out afterwards, and let me know how you're doing. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Judy. So we have 3 more questions. Are you okay if we do those final 3 and go from there?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So we'll take these final 3 questions and then we'll conclude. So the next person up is Tom. Let me unmute you. Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
Hi, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Judy. Thank you so much. I'm fairly new to all this, and I was really captivated by one of the videos of Sid talking, and he's explaining the 3 principles and what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of pauses and says, what is a feeling,
mm-hmm.
A nice feeling.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been feeling that, but I'm just really curious, how do you relate to that personally, and what is that nice feeling for you when you find it?
Peace of mind, I'd say, is the feeling that people are looking for. Everybody in the world wants peace of mind. That's really what people want. And it might look a little bit different to everybody, but that's where all the juice is, for people, is moments of peace in their own mind where they can enjoy the beauty of life, enjoy the moment, be present, and have a rich experience of life. But when Sid talks about the feeling, it's just what I was just talking about with Trevor, that you know, our feelings go up and they go down, you know, so we have feeling states that are joyful and peaceful and comfortable and easy and compassionate and loving, and we have feeling states that are angry and mean-spirited and full of negative emotions and destructive and whatever. And that's always a shadow. It's the reflection of the quality of the thinking we're doing. So the feeling state that we're in is like the barometer that tells us when a storm is coming. You know, when the barometric pressure changes, you notice it through your feeling state, and a bad feeling is a sign that you're using your thinking against yourself innocently without meaning to. Nobody means to do that. It just happens. So when you're using your thinking against yourself, your feeling state tells you, hey, you don't want to feel this way. This is nasty, you know? And then if you just take that as a warning, embrace it as, oh, thank you for that information. I really appreciate it. And leave your thinking alone for a while, your spirits lift and your feeling changes, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that shift into a quieter, more positive feeling. And that's the feedback that you get when your head clears and your thinking restores to balance. So that's
nice. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom. And something that I've noticed as well, Judy, let me know if this resonates for you too, but is that with that reference point for peace of mind, I've noticed that more and more I can have that experience even in the emotional storm, in a sense.
Yeah.
But to me, like that's a level of freedom that I didn't know that I was even looking for. But I'm so grateful to have that it's no longer about not having the bad feelings or, you know, being afraid. And I'm not saying that I never get scared or that I always have this, but more and more I'm seeing like, oh, peace of mind is available independent of what the emotional experience is in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, it's like the current underneath the ocean. Even when there's a hurricane, the current is smooth and steady.
Yeah.
And that's that beautiful feeling that's always available.
Yeah.
Or believing in it, and then it's there. Yeah. I love that, Rohini. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Tom. So we'll go next to Sue Cross. Hi, Sue.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you both. It's my first time.
Oh, nice.
Welcome.
Typing in on one of these calls. Very good to meet you. What you've been talking about has made me think a little bit about the work that I'm doing. I'm a coach for people who are living with Alzheimer's. So I start working with people often early onset, 14, 15 years into the disease, and they have been amazing teachers for me.
Mm-hmm.
The intellect and the rational mind is what gets kind of discombobulated by the disease. But what I've seen that has been so beautiful and so heartening is that they also have access to peace of mind, and to wisdom, and to joy, and to presence. And I notice a lot of my clients are happier and more peaceful than so many of the people I see walking around. Many of my friends who get very caught up in thought, take it very seriously. Something falls away with folks who are living in this condition that they often do need drawing out. They need the right kind of spark and engagement. They need to know that they're being seen. But when I show up with my very deep listening and my presence, what's available is absolutely amazing to me. And I just wondered if you'd ever worked with people with dementia or people with other kinds of...
I actually have not worked with him, but my father-in-law had Alzheimer's. Since I did, because you know, I was part of the family and until he died, actually, and one of the things that I noticed about him, he was really kind of cross as a person before this happened. He was very impatient and he wanted things his way, and he wanted it, if he asked for it and you didn't do it right away, he would get kind of pushy about it. And he'd been an executive his whole life. He hated retirement, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And how we knew when he first started kind of losing it is that that started to drift away and he got appreciative. And it was very, and I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, it's really amazing, you know, I brought him something, you know, like some iced tea or something the other day while he was sitting watching television. And he actually turned away from the TV and took the iced tea and said, "Thank you, dear. You've always been very good to me." And she said, "He's never said that." You know, she said, "I know I've always been really good to him and I don't worry about it, but he's never said that." And she said, "I wonder if there's something wrong with him." I was like, well, how would you describe that? But yeah, he did. He turned and he got very, he gentled. You know, and the more distant he got from the everyday problems of life, and the more he was living in his own little world, you know, as long as you didn't argue with him, you know, what I learned from it is if he's having a flight of fancy and he thinks there's somebody here that isn't here, well, they're here for him. So fine, let's just go with it. And if you go with it, you know, it's fine. And even after he had to be hospitalized because he wandered off, it was becoming dangerous, you know, because he would get lost. And even though he was wearing a bracelet, sometimes people didn't find him soon enough. So he was hospitalized, but and then he died shortly thereafter. But I went to visit him in the hospital, and it was, I went with my husband. It was about the time we were getting divorced, but, you know, we didn't want to discuss that with him. And I was close to him. And so, of course, I went. And I went with my husband. And he said to him, as though he were still a young man, he said, "Well, she's a nice girl. You should date her." We always thought that was so funny. But, you know, it was so sweet. So I really see what you're saying, you know, that people, they do, as long as you don't make them feel bad about their loss, you know, kind of, I think one of the mistakes that people make with people in dementia, my mother had it as well, but I didn't spend as much time with her because I was overseas at the time. But my dad did. And my dad said, you know, it's harmless. It's a harmless thing. She just has thoughts about what's going on that aren't really what's going on, but they are going on for her. So I just see it as harmless and I go along with it. So I think I see your point. And it is just a different use of whatever there is in the mind. You know, if you lose one capacity, whatever you still got, it will continue to work. But it's missing, you know, maybe the governance or some of the other parts of the mind that might have straightened it out.
The executive functioning, yeah. And agency that comes with that.
Yeah.
But it is really heartening to know that wisdom is available even there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Always there.
Always there.
Oh, thank you, Sue. Thanks so much for sharing. All right, the next person is owner. Actually, I think that's Dennis. Dennis, is that you? Let me unmute you. Is that you, Dennis?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Dennis.
Hey, Judy, I had a question for you.
Okay.
I've got a couple kids, 16 to 18. I wanted to recommend a book for them to read. So what would you suggest? One is, I actually don't know, is a starting golfer, and he gets upset with himself, and his grandmother wanted me to, and I said, well, I'll find a book. So
yeah,
I would prefer right now not to talk to him. And then the other one is a younger golfer who's really a good golfer, but you know, he's somewhat interested in learning how to find some confidence or whatever. So do you have any books in mind?
Well, I think that the book that means a lot to that I've surprisingly, because I can't explain why, but I think Sid's Second Chance still is a very powerful book for people that are you know, looking for self-confidence and looking for forgiveness and looking for just rising above the thoughts that they generally have. Because really the whole theme of that book is somebody who's suffered, you know, emotionally over things, and Sid helping them past that. Or Sid in the form of Jonathan. But it's got a lot of gems in it. I reread it recently again, and I thought, wow, you know, nobody really appreciates that book anymore because Sid wrote so many other things after that, and everybody thinks they must be better. But I would say if he's willing to suspend, you know, judgment about, is this, you know, the greatest work of fiction ever written, and just see that it's a story that has a philosophical message, that might be a good book for the first person that you mentioned.
They're both about the same age.
Yeah. And, you know, I haven't, a lot of people like the first book for people that are in sports. I used to work with a lot of sports psychologists, and a lot of them, and I haven't read it for a long time, so I don't remember why this, you know, but it was at the time I thought that was true. Garrett Kramer's first book, and you'd have to look on Amazon to see which one of Garrett's books it is, but it's the first book he wrote about sports performance. And I had a person in my class at WVU who was a swimming coach, and I had put that book on a list of books that, you know, were relevant to the principles, and she got that book and she started sharing it with her swimmers, who they would so concentrate on the mistakes they were making that they would make them again. You know, it's kind of like, if you think about it, then you're going to make them again. And so she said that they found that book extremely inspiring and helpful. So I don't know if that's useful to you, but I might recommend that.
And I saw that Still Power is the name. It came through on the chat.
Still Power, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you read the book yourself, Judy?
Yes, I did. I just haven't read it for a while. I read it years ago when it first came out. But yes, I did read it, and that's why I put it on the list, because at the time I thought, you know, now there's some things that have been written since then that I'm not as excited about, but I thought that was lovely. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely recommend. Actually, I agree with you with Sid's Second Chance. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. It was like his first attempt to get the message out, and it was very fresh. Yeah.
It's a lovely
Garrett
one.
Kramer. What was it? What was that word again? The name of the
Still
Power.
Still Power.
Stillpower.
Okay. All right.
Garrett Kramer.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Dennis.
It's nice to see you, Dennis.
Nice to be here.
Take care.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So one person snuck in under the wire. Can we just go with one last one, and that will be the final call? Okay, Jen. Let me unmute you. Hi, Jen.
Thanks for letting me sneak in.
Hi, Jen.
It is early in the morning here. As a veteran, I'm trying to get this understanding out to them. But as you know, they seem to hide under a lot of rocks.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to work out, you know, what are some of the things. I volunteer a lot at my local Return Services League. Do I end up going to a place, what we call Ward 17, which is at the Heidelberg Repat here in Melbourne, Australia? Do I go and say hi in there, or, you know, what are your suggestions on trying to find them and pulling them out of the rock and having a conversation?
You know, the love is always the answer, as you probably are very aware. And so wherever they are, if they let you in, I would go there. And you know, what I've found is what means the most to the guys that I work with is that I don't ever see what's wrong with them. I really don't, actually. I just look at them and I see a beautiful soul behind all the pain, and that soul, and I talk to that. I just talk to them like they were fine, you know, and we have a nice time, and I will talk about whatever they want to talk about. But I don't talk about the past. I mean, I do say that. I say, you know, we're here now, you're safe, I'm safe, you know, we're here together. So the past is gone. And I try to work in without being judgmental about it, just say, let's talk about what we're doing now, what's in the future, or what we're looking forward to. Now, for a lot of them that have had serious injuries and, a lot of trouble in their life, and since they don't look forward to much, but everybody wants to look forward to things. And so sometimes it's just having conversations where they really help each other, because somebody will say, well, you know what, I went on a picnic with my kids the other day, and I didn't think I was going to like it, and I didn't really want to go, but my wife said, oh, please, the kids will be so disappointed if you don't come. And he said, and I was just watching them kick a soccer ball around, and I realized I could still have fun with my kids. They didn't go to war. I don't have to share this misery with them. And he said it was so freeing to him. And he started kicking the ball with them, and they were so thrilled because their dad was playing with them, and had a really nice time. And it's when they start talking about that, if you can get, turn them to talking about insights that they've had, sharing with each other is very powerful for them. Something other than what they normally share, which is how bad everything is, And so I'll often start with saying, well, did anybody have anything funny happen this week? Or, what are some things you could talk about that surprised you? Or always trying to focus on just ordinary life. Because the problem with veterans is they think they're so different from everybody else, and only people that have suffered can understand them. And, I'm not going to say that's bullshit, but it is. I'm not going to say it to them, but it is, because we're all just people, and everybody's had something go on. But I had a group the other day. I do a group on Wednesdays for veterans, and I had a guy that was new to group, and he started out to introduce himself. He said, and I'm sure that you can understand that I'm struggling with alcohol and drugs, and I have PTSD, and the reason is because I killed a kid in Afghanistan, and he was about the same age as my son, and when I realized that I'd killed some father and mother's child, I just can't live with myself. And so, of course, you can understand why I'm never going to be well again. That was his introduction. I said, oh, gee, I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't see it that way. I'm sure you can feel better again, even though that memory is part of your life now. You're not going to forget that. But I said, I just have one question. I said, when you pulled the trigger, did you know it was a child? And he said, no, I didn't know who it was. I didn't know what I was shooting. I was just shooting at a building where somebody told me there were snipers. And they, given the order to shoot. And I said, so really, it was a terrible, terrible accident. And it touched your heart. And it actually changed his mind. I mean, he got out of the military as a result of that. He just decided war was terrible. He took a dishonorable discharge and doesn't even get benefits because he just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't kill people. And I said, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. And he said, but I'm a terrible person. I killed this kid. And I said, no, you pull the trigger when your sergeant or whoever told you, shoot, there's snipers in there. And accidentally, there was a little boy in there. And I said, that's the horror of war. You don't know. But that doesn't make you a bad person. And he said, I've never thought about it that way. And I said, well, we just went on with the group. And at the end of the group, he came to me and he said, that could help me to realize that I didn't know what I was shooting at when I shot. See, he forgot that. I mean, you would think that would be the first thing you'd think of. Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't know. But that isn't what he thought of. He thought of his son. So a lot of the times, if you can just get him an ordinary, just like talking to him like any ordinary person, like that was not the biggest deal. That what they did was not the biggest deal that ever happened. It was just, part of their life, that it really helps to normalize. I always go to ordinary. That's my go-to place, is we're all just human beings and we're living an ordinary life, but we have extraordinary opportunities to learn. So if you just bring love in yourself and a nice feeling and a realization that they're really fine deep down, you'll know what to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
By the way, I love Melbourne. I spent a lot of time in Australia, and it's a beautiful city.
Thank you. It is, yeah, I'm really happy here.
Yeah.
And we have Fiona Lukey's here, so it's even a bigger blessing.
Yes, that's great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
the question. And Judy, thank you so much. Hang on, I've lost you. Where are you? There you are. Thank you so much for participating today. So
Pleasure.
grateful. Yeah, and I understand that you have an ongoing webinar with Christine Heath. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we've taken a hiatus because we're going to change the format. So I will let you know when we start it up again.
Hey, all right then.
But, yes, we do. And then I do. I don't always put out the things that I do. I should take more pains to let people know when I'm doing things, because I do a lot of things online. So I'll be more careful to let you know.
Yeah. Is there anything specific now, or is it just to be?
No, we're taking this little hiatus so I can work on my book, and Chris is doing something, and we're developing a podcast together.
Oh,
so we thought we need to just give ourselves a break and let everybody have the summer off. So that's
all right. So we have a podcast to look forward to and a book to look forward to. Very exciting.
Yeah, we're going to do a podcast on the myths of mental health.
Oh, love it. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are considering still the Soul Centered Series 7-month program, there are still some spaces available. So if you're interested and you just want to talk about it, just reach out to me. I'm happy to speak with you. Although Angus and I are going away this Wednesday, so we'll be gone for about 10 days. But either check in with me before then, or when we get back, I'll reach out. And
one thing about that, as a person who was lucky enough to be asked to be part of it, what a lovely group of people, and they stayed connected, and it just was a beautiful experience. I highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's really, it's a beautiful, this kind of webinar experience, I think, gives us a little flavor of dropping into that space of peace and love in our hearts. So that's really the intent behind the program. Well, thank you, Judy. I am going to let everybody unmute so they can say goodbye.